Sir, stop right there. Don't move. You were selected and you will comply.
I am complying. Please lower your
Don't
voice.
tell me how to do my job. What's in the bag?
Personal items and gifts. I've shown my
That doesn't
ID.
mean anything. You don't get to question
I'm asking
me.
what rule I...
TSA officer Gerald Whitmore spots a black man in the security line at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The man is wearing full Army combat uniform, camouflage fatigues, with unit patches clearly visible, an American flag on his shoulder, tan combat boots. His tactical backpack sits on the conveyor belt, also bearing an American flag patch. There is absolutely no ambiguity about who this man is. But Whitmore doesn't see a soldier. He sees a target. Sergeant First Class Darius Okonkwo, a 22-year Army veteran and decorated Green Beret who has served 4 combat tours, 2 in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, is returning home from a training exercise at Fort Benning. He's wearing the uniform of the United States Army. His credentials are stitched into his chest, and none of it matters to Whitmore. The security cameras overhead capture everything. Whitmore approaches, positions himself directly in front of the soldier, and the confrontation begins. What happens over the next 47 minutes will be recorded from 12 different security camera angles, 3 TSA body cameras, and at least 15 cell phones. It will cost the federal government $23.7 million. Gerald Whitmore, 43, has been with TSA Atlanta for 11 years. He has 34 formal complaints in his file 29 involving passengers of color. He specifically requested assignment to the main security checkpoint at the domestic terminal, where he processes over 400 passengers daily. Internal documents reveal his random selection rate for black passengers is 11 times higher than for white passengers. His supervisors call him thorough. Fellow officers have a different name for him, the collector, because he collects minorities for secondary screening like trophies. He's been reprimanded twice but never disciplined. His body camera has malfunctioned during 19 prior incidents that resulted in complaints. But today, the overhead security cameras are rolling. His colleagues' body cameras are recording, and a dozen passengers have their phones out. Whitmore has never faced a consequence in his career. That's about to change. Sergeant First Class Darius Okonkwo, 41, born on the south side of Chicago, raised by his grandmother after his mother died when he was 7, enlisted the day after his 18th birthday. 22 years of service, 4 combat deployments. Special Forces qualified a Green Beret. He's earned the Bronze Star with Valor, the Purple Heart wounded by an IED in Helmand Province, and the Combat Infantryman Badge. He's currently assigned to the 3rd Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg. He's returning from a 2-week training exercise at Fort Benning, still in uniform, because he came straight from the field to catch his flight home to see his wife, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, a cardiologist at Duke University Medical Center, and his 2 daughters, ages 8 and 12. He's wearing the uniform of the United States Army. His name is stitched on his chest, his rank is displayed on his collar, his unit patches are sewn onto his shoulders, his service is literally written on his body, and Gerald Whitmore looks at him and sees a fraud. 3:47 p.m. The security camera footage, which will later be played in federal court, shows SFC Okonkwo approaching the security checkpoint in full uniform. He places his tactical backpack on the conveyor belt. The American flag patch is clearly visible. He removes his patrol cap and places it in a bin. He's calm, professional, following every procedure. The footage shows Whitmore watching from his position near the X-ray monitors. His head tracks Okonkwo's movement through the line. He whispers something to his colleague, Officer Pamela Vance. Her body camera, which is recording, captures his words. "Watch this. Probably stole that uniform from a surplus store. These guys think they can wear whatever they want." Whitmore steps forward, directly into Okonkwo's path. The overhead camera captures the moment perfectly, the TSA officer in blue positioning himself in front of the soldier in camouflage. "Sir, you've been randomly selected for additional screening." Okonkwo's expression doesn't change. He's been through this before. "No problem, officer, but this time will be different. This time, the cameras are watching. And this time, Whitmore is about to go too far." The secondary screening area, multiple cameras recording. Whitmore stands across from Okonkwo, examining his military ID with theatrical suspicion. The body camera footage captures his words with crystal clarity. "This uniform? Where'd you get it?" "I'm in the Army, sir. I'm assigned to 3rd Special Forces Group," Whitmore snorts. "Anyone can buy this stuff online. Stolen valor is a federal crime, you know." Okonkwo's jaw tightens, but his voice remains steady. 22 years of military discipline holding. "Sir, my name is on my uniform. My rank is on my collar. My unit patch is on my shoulder. I have my military ID, my CAC card, and my travel orders. What else do you need?" Whitmore ignores the documents in his hand. "These can be faked. I've seen it before." He turns to Vance. "Run his name. Let's see if he's really who he says he is." The security camera captures what happens next. Whitmore reaches for Okonkwo's tactical backpack and begins pulling items out, tossing them onto the table. Extra uniforms, family photos, a small American flag that Okonkwo's daughter made him at school. "What's this?" Whitmore holds up a challenge coin from Okonkwo's unit. "You buy this at a pawn shop?" Okonkwo's voice drops, controlled but carrying an edge of steel. "That was given to me by my commanding officer after we extracted 12 hostages from a Taliban compound in Kunar province. 4 of my men died on that mission." Whitmore smirks. "Sure they did." What follows is captured on no fewer than 12 camera angles. The overhead security cameras, 3 TSA body cameras, and 15 cell phones from passengers who have stopped to watch a TSA officer harass a man in military uniform. Whitmore demands a full pat-down, invasive, prolonged, performed in full view of the security checkpoint. Passengers are filming openly now. Some are shouting, "He's in uniform! That's a soldier! What are you doing?" "This is wrong. Someone call a supervisor." Whitmore ignores them. He orders Okonkwo to remove his uniform jacket, his blouse, exposing the brown undershirt beneath. He demands Okonkwo remove his boots. A decorated green beret stands in his socks on the cold airport floor, while a TSA officer with 34 complaints rifles through his belongings. Then Whitmore finds the metal case. Inside, the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Combat Infantryman Badge. "These real?" Whitmore asks, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or did you buy these on eBay too?" Okonkwo's response is quiet, controlled, and devastating. "The Purple Heart was awarded after an IED took my left kidney in Helmand Province in 2009. The scar is still on my back if you'd like to see it." Whitmore's response, captured on 3 body cameras. "That won't be necessary, but you're not going anywhere until we verify you're not impersonating military personnel." He handcuffs Sergeant First Class Darius Okonkwo, a man who has bled for his country, to a chair in the screening room. Sergeant First Class Darius Okonkwo had been handcuffed for 1 hour and 47 minutes when Atlanta PD Sergeant Keisha Lawson walked through the door. A 20-year police veteran and former Army Reserve soldier herself, she knew exactly what she was looking at. A decorated soldier in uniform, handcuffed like a criminal, his medals spread across a table like evidence. Whitmore stepped forward. "Sergeant, we have a possible stolen valor situation. This individual's documentation is suspicious." Sergeant Lawson didn't respond. She examined Okonkwo's military ID, his CAC card, his travel orders, then the metal case, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Combat Infantryman Badge. Her voice was ice. "Officer Whitmore, his military ID is valid, his CAC card is valid, his travel orders are signed, his name is stitched on his chest. What exactly is suspicious?" "The documents could be forged." "Did you scan his CAC card? Did you call Fort Bragg? Did you do anything except handcuff a soldier and dump his medals on a table?" "Silence. Remove the handcuffs. Now." "I don't take orders from Atlanta PD." "Then let me be clear. You've detained an active duty soldier without probable cause. If you don't remove those handcuffs in 30 seconds, I'll arrest you for unlawful detention and ensure the FBI has this footage by morning." The security camera captured Whitmore's trembling hands reaching for his keys, the click of handcuffs releasing, Okonkwo rubbing the red marks on his wrists. At 6:12 p.m., 2 hours and 25 minutes after being pulled aside, Sergeant First Class Okonkwo was finally free. His flight had departed 90 minutes earlier, but the footage was already spreading, and Gerald Whitmore's career was already over. The first video hit Twitter at 6:47 p.m. Passenger Michelle Torres had recorded 4 minutes of footage showing Whitmore demanding Okonkwo remove his uniform, handling medals with disrespect, passengers shouting in protest. Her caption, "Just watched TSA handcuff a soldier in full uniform. They accused him of stolen valor. He had a Purple Heart. What is happening?" Within 3 hours, 340,000 views. By midnight, 2 million. 14 other passengers had recorded portions. Their videos flooded Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, each showing different moments of humiliation. Whitmore's sneer about the challenge coin, his eBay comment about the Purple Heart, the handcuffs clicking shut. By morning, every major network led with the footage. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC. The images were devastating. A black soldier in Army uniform, handcuffed and humiliated. The Pentagon statement confirmed everything. Sergeant First Class Darius Okonkwo has served with distinction for 22 years, including 4 combat deployments. He is the recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor and the Purple Heart. We are deeply troubled by this treatment. Veterans organizations mobilized furiously. VFW demanded Whitmore's termination. American Legion called for congressional investigation. Special Forces veterans flooded social media with deployment photos alongside Okonkwo. FOIA requests revealed Whitmore's 34 complaints, his racial targeting patterns, the 19 malfunctioning body cameras during prior incidents. The Secretary of Homeland Security apologized publicly. Whitmore was placed on administrative leave, but Okonkwo wanted more than apologies. He called attorney Solomon Adeyemi, former JAG prosecutor turned civil rights litigator. "I want to make sure this never happens to another soldier, whatever it takes." Adeyemi's response, "Then let's get to work." The trial began 18 months later in a packed federal courtroom. Veterans filled the gallery. Media lined up before dawn. Solomon Adeyemi's opening was devastating. "You won't take anyone's word. You'll see it from 12 camera angles with perfect audio. You'll watch a decorated Green Beret handcuffed because a TSA officer saw his skin, not his service." The evidence was overwhelming. 12 security camera angles played simultaneously. Body camera footage captured Whitmore's sneering tone, his refusal to verify credentials. "Where'd you get this uniform? These can be faked. Did you buy these on eBay?" Several jurors cried. A retired Marine was excused to compose himself. Okonkwo testified for 6 hours. He described his 22 years of service, 4 combat deployments, the brothers he'd lost. Then May 17th, the handcuffs, the medals dumped on the table. When asked how it felt hearing Whitmore question his Purple Heart, Okonkwo paused 12 seconds. "I've been shot at in 3 countries. I've held dying men. But standing in that airport, in my socks, with that man asking if I bought my Purple Heart on eBay, that was when I felt most like I didn't belong in my own country." Under cross-examination, Whitmore crumbled. "What made you approach Sergeant Okonkwo specifically?" He matched a profile. "What profile? His uniform? His ID? His race?" No answer. Adeyemi's closing, "This wasn't a mistake. Whitmore saw a black man and assumed criminal. The cameras caught everything. Send a message that echoes through every checkpoint in America." The jury deliberated 11 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts. The damages phase lasted 1 week. Medical experts described Okonkwo's compounded PTSD panic attacks in crowds, flashbacks triggered by TSA uniforms, nightmares of being handcuffed while faceless figures laughed at his medals. Career experts calculated the professional impact: delayed promotions, security clearance reviews, medical leave, millions in damages. Adeyemi's closing: "What's it worth to be treated like a citizen in your own country? Whatever number you choose, make it large enough that the federal government never forgets." The jury deliberated 5 hours. The foreman's voice trembled reading the verdict. Compensatory damages, $12.4 million. Punitive damages, $11.3 million. Total, $23.7 million, the largest civil rights verdict against TSA in American history. The courtroom erupted. Veterans saluted. Okonkwo's wife collapsed into his arms. Whitmore was terminated within 6 hours, permanently barred from federal employment. Vance was terminated the next day. 3 supervisors were demoted. The Department of Homeland Security announced sweeping reforms: mandatory anti-bias training with annual recertification, random selection auditing by race and ethnicity, military credential verification protocols before any detention broader, body camera accountability with severe penalties for malfunctions, independent civilian oversight board, zero tolerance for unverified stolen valor accusations. The reforms were named the Okonkwo Protocols. Every TSA officer in America would learn that name and understand that bias has a price. Sergeant First Class Okonkwo kept his promise. He established the Okonkwo Veterans Defense Fund with $12 million, providing free legal representation to service members facing discrimination. Year 1, 47 cases, 39 victories, $14 million in settlements, every penny reinvested. He testified before Congress 4 times, instrumental in passing the Veterans Dignity in Travel Act, mandating real-time credential verification and prohibiting detention of uniformed personnel without supervisor approval. The president signed it at a White House ceremony, Okonkwo standing behind her in dress uniform. Sergeant Okonkwo could have walked away. Instead, he chose to fight for every service member who comes after him. That's what heroes do. 26 months after the verdict, Okonkwo received the news: promotion to Master Sergeant, the second highest enlisted rank. At Fort Liberty, his commanding general pinned the new rank on his collar, while Amara and the girls watched, tears streaming. He is everything a soldier should be, everything an American should be. Gerald Whitmore disappeared, reportedly working as a warehouse security guard in rural Alabama. He never apologized, but his name became a cautionary tale whispered in TSA break rooms nationwide. Military discrimination complaints dropped 67% under the Okonkwo Protocols. The cameras kept watching. Officers thought twice. If you think this situation was bad, wait until you see what happens in the case on the right-hand side.
Stop! Identification now! Step away from the vehicle!
I'm a federal judge! My credentials are in the vehicle! There's no probable cause for this
Don't
stop.
argue! Papers, now! Step back or I will place you on the ground!
I am a federal judge! My children are with me!
The Whole Foods on Hennepin Avenue was bustling when it happened. Saturday morning, 10:23 a.m., the kind of Minnesota autumn that painted everything in gold and crimson, crisp air carrying the smell of fallen leaves and fresh coffee from the cafe inside. Judge Lorraine Ashford had pulled into the lot for a quick grocery run before heading back to her mother's house. Still in weekend clothes, cream sweater, dark jeans, her reading glasses pushed up on her head. Her 9-year-old son, Damon, was asking about what Grandma might cook for dinner. Her 7-year-old daughter, Zoe, was already sneaking grapes from one of the bags. Just another Saturday errand. Except 3 ICE agents were stepping out of an unmarked black Tahoe she hadn't noticed parked 2 rows over. Their body cameras were already rolling, recording what would become the most expensive grocery trip in Minnesota history. If you're ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this story. Agent Vincent Hargrove led the approach. His partners, Agents Denise Fullerton and Keith Rawlings, spread wide in a tactical formation like they were cornering something dangerous. Lorraine saw them coming as she lifted a paper bag into the trunk. Read the spacing, the hands hovering near their belts, the body language of men who'd already made their decision. 23 years on the federal bench had taught her to read people in seconds. Federal agents, immigration, and customs enforcement patches visible on their tactical vests, moving toward her rental SUV like she was already guilty of something. She knew where this was headed before Hargrove reached her bumper. Zoe noticed them first. Her small hand froze mid-reach for another grape, her eyes going wide at the armed men approaching. The tears started before Lorraine could say anything. Quiet at first, then building into frightened sobs that cut through the autumn air. Damon stopped mid-sentence about dinner. The grocery bag slipped from his fingers, oranges rolling across the pavement as he stared at the approaching agents, his excitement fading into something no 9-year-old should ever feel in a parking lot with his mother. Afternoon. Hargrove's voice cut through Zoe's cries. Flat, bureaucratic, rehearsed. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, conducting a compliance check in this area, need to see identification and proof of legal status. Lorraine kept her hands visible, moving slowly to place the grocery bag she was holding onto the trunk's edge. 23 years of courtroom composure kicked in, despite her daughter's sobs growing louder beside her. I'm a federal judge, United States District Court, Northern District of Texas, Judge Lorraine Ashford. She kept her voice level, clear enough for the body cameras. My identification is in my purse in the vehicle. I'm happy to have my credentials verified through the federal judiciary. Hargrove didn't move, didn't acknowledge the credentials. Everyone claims to be someone important. Papers. Now, the dismissal landed like a slap. Lorraine felt the familiar heat ignite in her chest, the quiet fury that came from being treated like this in a grocery store parking lot with her children watching. Her daughter crying, her son frozen in fear, all because 3 federal agents saw a black woman in casual clothes and made assumptions. Officer, you have no reasonable suspicion of any criminal activity. Lorraine's voice sharpened but remained controlled. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable seizures. Demanding identification without probable cause or articulable suspicion violates clearly established constitutional law. I'm a sitting federal judge. I rule on these cases. Zoe's small body pressed against Lorraine's leg, her fingers gripping the fabric of her mother's jeans. The sobs came harder now, her face buried against her mother's thigh. Mommy, I'm scared. Mommy. It's okay, baby. Lorraine placed a gentle hand on her daughter's head while keeping her eyes on Hargrove. Stay close to me. Damon had moved to his sister's side, his arm around her shoulders, trying to comfort her even as his own hands trembled. His eyes darted between the agents, wide and frightened, watching every movement like a child who suddenly understood the world was more dangerous than he'd imagined. But it wasn't okay. Fullerton moved to the passenger side of the rental SUV, peering through the windows. Rawlings positioned himself near the cart, cutting off any path toward the store. The black Tahoe blocked her from behind. She was boxed in. Bystanders were starting to notice. A woman loading her own groceries 3 spaces over pulled out her phone. A Whole Foods employee in a green apron rushed toward the commotion, confusion and alarm on his face. An elderly man near the store entrance stopped to watch. The autumn sun filtered through scattered clouds, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Leaves skittered across the pavement in the breeze. And Judge Lorraine Ashford, who had spent over 2 decades upholding the Constitution from the federal bench, stood surrounded by agents who saw nothing but her skin color. Lorraine reached slowly for her purse on the passenger seat. Hargrove's hand moved to his belt. Stop. Don't reach for anything. Step away from the vehicle. I'm retrieving my identification. Lorraine kept her voice steady. You asked for documentation. It's in my purse. Step away from the vehicle now. The command hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Around them, the parking lot continued its Saturday rhythm. Families loading SUVs, couples walking hand in hand toward the entrance, the smell of roasted coffee drifting through the automatic doors. But more people were stopping now, more phones coming out. The Whole Foods employee stood frozen near the cart return, unsure what to do. Lorraine stepped back from the car, hands raised where Hargrove could see them. I'm complying. I'm Judge Lorraine Ashford, United States District Court for the Northern District of Texas. I'm unarmed. My children are with me. There is no reasonable suspicion for this stop. This is an unlawful seizure. She said it loud enough for every body camera, every bystander phone, every witness in that parking lot. Hargrove grabbed her wrist the moment she cleared the door. His grip was iron, twisting her arm behind her back with practiced efficiency. Fullerton moved in from the other side. The handcuffs were cold against her skin, the metal biting into her wrists as they clicked shut. Zoe's scream split the autumn air. The 7-year-old collapsed to her knees on the pavement, her small body heaving with sobs. "Mommy, mommy, mommy," the word repeated like a desperate prayer, her hands reaching toward her mother even as the distance between them grew. "It's okay, baby. Stay right there. Don't move." Lorraine kept her voice steady even as her heart shattered. "Someone call my mother. Eleanor Ashford. Her number is in my phone." Damon stepped forward, his small frame trembling but his chin raised. His voice cracked high and frightened but determined. "Leave my mom alone. She's a judge. She's a federal judge. You can't do this." Rawlings blocked his path, one hand raised in warning. "Stay back, son." "I'm not your son." Damon's voice broke completely. "That's my mom. Let her go." Lorraine turned her head as Hargrove walked her toward the black Tahoe. "Damon, take care of your sister. Someone is going to call Grandma. Stay with the nice people. I'll be okay." "I promise I'll be okay." The Whole Foods employee rushed over, kneeling beside Zoe, trying to comfort her. A woman with silver hair approached Damon, speaking softly, her phone already pressed to her ear. Bystanders formed a loose, protective circle around the children. The Tahoe's door opened. Hargrove guided her head down as they loaded her into the back seat. Through the tinted window, Lorraine watched Zoe reach toward the vehicle, her small arm extended, fingers grasping at empty air. Damon held his sister back, his own face streaked with tears he was trying to hide. The door slammed shut. The last thing she saw was her daughter collapsing against her brother, both children clinging to each other in a parking lot full of strangers. The Tahoe pulled out of the lot at 10:41 a.m. Lorraine sat in silence, wrists aching from the handcuffs, and listened. Hargrove drove. Fullerton sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone. Rawlings had stayed behind, presumably dealing with paperwork, or the children, or the growing crowd of witnesses. The radio crackled with dispatch codes. The GPS showed a route northeast, 34 minutes to the processing facility. "That's 4 from this zone this week." Hargrove's voice was casual, conversational, like he was discussing lunch plans. "Regional's going to love the numbers." Fullerton didn't look up from her phone. "These neighborhoods are easy. Nobody fights back." The words landed in Lorraine's gut like stones. Quota systems, targeting minority neighborhoods, easy numbers, nobody fights back. She kept her face neutral, her breathing steady, but her mind sharpened to a razor's edge. 23 years on the federal bench, appointed by a Republican president who'd called her a model of judicial integrity, confirmed unanimously by the Senate 98-0, hundreds of cases decided. Fourth Amendment jurisprudence shaped by her rulings. Constitutional law students studied her opinions in classrooms across the country. And here she sat, handcuffed in the back of a federal vehicle, listening to agents casually admit to systematic racial profiling. She had ruled on cases exactly like this. Defendants who claimed their Fourth Amendment rights were violated. Plaintiffs who alleged patterns of discriminatory enforcement. She had weighed evidence, considered arguments, issued opinions that shaped how these laws were applied. Now she was living it. The Tahoe merged onto the highway. Minneapolis slid past the tinted windows, ordinary and indifferent. Somewhere behind her, her children waited with strangers. Her mother would be receiving a frantic call any moment. Her judicial chambers in Dallas sat empty, her nameplate on the door, her robe hanging in the closet. Lorraine closed her eyes and committed every word to memory. The exact phrasing, the casual tone, the systemic corruption hiding behind badges and bureaucratic language. This wasn't just her case anymore. This was evidence of something much larger. And unlike the others who'd been detained in these easy neighborhoods, Judge Lorraine Ashford knew exactly how to make them pay. The facility smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Lorraine was led through intake, still handcuffed, her wrists raw where the metal had dug in during the ride. Voices echoed off tile floors. Keyboards clicked. Phones rang in distant offices. No one looked at her face. She was just another file, another number, another body moving through the system. A processing agent named Kilpatrick took her fingerprints with bureaucratic indifference, pressed each finger to the scanner like he'd done it 10,000 times before, which he probably had. Name? Judge Lorraine Ashford, United States District Court, Northern District of Texas. Kilpatrick didn't look up. Date of birth? March 7th, 1972. I'm a sitting federal judge. I need you to verify my credentials through the administrative office of the U.S. courts. All in due time. The same flat deflection she'd heard 3 times already. Address? The photograph came next. Front-facing, side profile, the flash harsh against the institutional beige walls. 23 years of distinguished service, and now her face would exist in this database alongside actual criminals. They moved her to holding cell 4, 8 by 10 feet of concrete painted the color of nothing, metal bench bolted to the wall, fluorescent lights humming overhead at a frequency that drilled into her skull. The door locked behind her with a heavy mechanical click. Lorraine sat on the bench and let the cold seep into her skin. Time moved differently in confinement. Minutes stretched into eternities. She counted the ceiling tiles, 247. Counted them again to be sure. Ran through case law in her mind like prayer beads. Terry v. Ohio, Illinois v. Wardlow, Rodriguez v. United States. The standards for reasonable suspicion that Hargrove had ignored completely, but the case law couldn't quiet the other thoughts. Where were her children? Was Zoe still crying? Had someone reached her mother? Was Damon trying to be brave, holding everything inside the way he did when he was scared? Were they still in that parking lot, surrounded by strangers, waiting for someone to tell them their mother was coming back? The not knowing was worse than the cell, worse than the handcuffs, worse than the humiliation of being processed like a criminal in the country she'd sworn to serve. Lorraine pressed her palms against the cold bench and began building her case. Fourth Amendment violation. Unlawful seizure without probable cause, without reasonable suspicion, without any articulable basis beyond the color of her skin. Equal protection. Selective enforcement targeting minority neighborhoods. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her children's trauma, witnessed and documented by dozens of bystanders, pattern and practice. The quota conversation, the systematic targeting, the casual admission of institutional racism, each element another brick in the wall she would build around them. The fluorescent lights hummed. The clock in the hallway ticked forward, and Judge Lorraine Ashford sat in that cell, constructing the architecture of their destruction. 4 hours and 17 minutes after Hargrove had grabbed her wrist in that parking lot, the cell door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, gray suit, supervisor's badge, nameplate reading P. Garrett. Her face had the particular pallor of someone who had just realized exactly how badly her subordinates had miscalculated. Judge Ashford, not a question. I'm Agent Pauline Garrett. There's been a situation. The situation is that your agents detained a sitting federal judge without probable cause, ignored her repeated identification, and held her for over 4 hours while her minor children were left with strangers. Lorraine stood slowly, her legs stiff from the metal bench. That's not a situation. That's a constitutional violation. Garrett's jaw tightened. We've confirmed your identity with the administrative office of the U.S. courts. You're free to go. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just bureaucratic confirmation that they'd made a catastrophic mistake wrapped in language designed to minimize accountability. I want copies of all body camera footage from today's incident. Lorraine kept her voice level, each word precise. I want the incident report. I want the names and badge numbers of every agent involved, including you. I want documentation of the reasonable suspicion that supposedly justified my detention. You can file a formal request through proper channels. I'm filing it now, verbally, on whatever recording devices are operating in this facility. Lorraine stepped closer to Garrett. Agent Vincent Hargrove, badge number visible on his vest during arrest. Agent Denise Fullerton, Agent Keith Rawlings, and you, Agent Garrett. I want all of it documented. Garrett's expression hardened, but her eyes betrayed something else. Fear, maybe, or the dawning recognition that this wasn't going away quietly. We apologize for any inconvenience, Garrett said. Standard procedure in these operations. Lorraine almost laughed. Almost. Unlawful detention of a federal judge is not an inconvenience. Traumatizing my children is not standard procedure. What happened today was a constitutional violation documented by your own body cameras, by bystander recordings, and by my testimony. She collected her belongings from the property desk, her movements deliberate. Expect to hear from my attorneys, and expect this to be very, very public. She walked out of the facility into late afternoon sunlight that felt too bright after hours under fluorescent humming. The autumn air hit her face, sharp and clean. Somewhere across the city, her children were waiting. Lorraine Ashford had survived the cell. Now the real work would begin. The taxi pulled up to the curb at 3:47 p.m., 20 minutes from the facility to her mother's house in St. Paul, the longest 20 minutes of her life. Lorraine had barely opened the door when they came running. Zoe burst through the front entrance like something had launched her, her small legs pumping across the lawn, her face twisted with a mixture of terror and relief. She collided with Lorraine's body before she'd even stood fully upright, arms wrapping around her waist with desperate strength. "Mommy, mommy, mommy." The word came out broken, muffled against Lorraine's jacket. Zoe's entire body shook with sobs that seemed too large for her 7-year-old frame. Damon followed seconds behind. He was trying to hold it together. Lorraine could see it in the set of his jaw, the way he walked instead of ran, the 9-year-old's attempt at composure. But the moment he reached her, the moment her arm wrapped around his shoulders and pulled him close, everything crumbled. He buried his face against her side and cried. Lorraine knelt on the brown grass of her mother's front lawn, holding both children so tightly her arms ached. She could feel their hearts pounding against her chest, could feel the fear still trembling through their small bodies, could feel something fundamental that had broken in them today. "I'm here, babies. I'm right here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The taxi pulled away behind her. Neighbors watched from porches and windows. None of it mattered. Only the weight of her children in her arms. Only their breath against her neck. Only the knowledge that they were together again. Eleanor stood in the doorway. 78 years old, daughter of civil rights marchers who'd walked the streets of Houston in 1963, granddaughter of sharecroppers who'd known the particular terror of living black in East Texas. Her hands gripped the doorframe, trembling with something far older and deeper than fear. When Lorraine finally guided the children inside, Eleanor's voice came out quiet and terrible. "They put handcuffs on you in front of your babies?" Lorraine nodded, unable to speak past the rage lodged in her throat. Eleanor's eyes glistened. Her jaw tightened. 60 years of civil rights progress, and here stood her daughter, a federal judge, handcuffed in a grocery store parking lot while her grandchildren screamed. "What are you going to do?" Lorraine looked at her mother, then at Damon and Zoe still pressed against her sides, their tear-streaked faces turned up toward her. "I'm going to dismantle them." That night, the children refused to sleep in the guest room. Zoe positioned herself against Lorraine's left side, fingers twisted in the fabric of her shirt. Damon lay on her right, close enough that she could feel his breathing. Neither would let her out of sight. Neither would close their eyes until exhaustion finally claimed them. Lorraine lay awake in the darkness, listening to her children breathe, and began to document everything. Sunday morning found Lorraine at her mother's kitchen table, yellow legal pad filled with her precise handwriting. The October sunlight streamed through lace curtains Eleanor had hung 30 years ago. The smell of coffee mixed with the lingering scent of the bacon and eggs she'd made to coax the children into eating. Damon and Zoe sat in the living room, cartoon voices drifting in from the television, neither of them ready to be more than a room away from their mother. Lorraine wrote, "Timestamps, 10:23 a.m. Agents exit vehicle, 10:26 a.m. First demand for identification, 10:34 a.m. Handcuffs applied, 10:41 a.m. Transported from scene, 2:58 p.m. Identity verified, 3:12 p.m. Released. Badge numbers, Hargrove's visible on his vest during arrest, Fullerton's mentioned during processing, Rawlings captured in bystander footage. Exact quotes. Everyone claims to be someone important. That's 4 from this zone this week. Regional's going to love the numbers. These neighborhoods are easy. Nobody fights back. The quota conversation, word for word, exactly as spoken, committed to memory in the back of that Tahoe, and now preserved on paper. Her children's trauma, Zoe's collapse on the pavement, Damon's cracking voice trying to defend her. The nightmares that would come, the therapy that would be needed, the trust that had been shattered. Her phone buzzed. Another notification. The bystander videos were everywhere now. Lorraine spent an hour downloading every angle she could find. 6 different recordings from 6 different phones. The woman 3 spaces over, the teenager near the cart return, an elderly man by the entrance, a Whole Foods employee who'd filmed from inside, 2 others she couldn't identify, all of them capturing the same thing from different perspectives. Her calm assertions, her credentials dismissed, her children's terror, the handcuffs clicking shut. She backed up each video to 3 separate locations, cloud storage, external hard drive, emailed to herself and her personal attorney. By noon, her phone was ringing constantly. Word had spread through the federal judiciary like wildfire. Colleagues from the bench calling in shock and fury. A Ninth Circuit judge she'd known for 15 years. A D.C. Circuit judge who'd clerked with her decades ago. The chief judge of her own district demanding to know what he could do. The message was unanimous. This cannot stand. Lorraine looked at the legal pad filled with evidence. Looked at her children in the next room, still too afraid to let her out of sight. Thought about her grandmother who'd marched in Houston, her father who'd been denied service at lunch counters, the legacy of fighting back that ran through her blood. Settlement offers would come, confidentiality agreements, pressure to make this go away quietly. She thought about all the others who'd been stopped in those easy neighborhoods, the ones who didn't have her credentials, the ones who didn't have bystander phones, the ones who couldn't fight back. This wasn't going to be settled quietly. This was going to trial. Samuel Okonkwo's office occupied the corner of the 14th floor in a downtown Dallas high-rise. The walls told his story better than any biography could. Framed verdicts from 30 years of dismantling institutional racism, photographs with civil rights icons, newspaper clippings from cases that had changed how America understood discrimination. Lorraine sat across from him 2 weeks after the parking lot, her documentation spread across his mahogany desk. Okonkwo read in silence, his expression darkened with each page. The timestamps, the badge numbers, the bystander video descriptions. The children's psychological intake forms from their first therapy session, Zoe's nightmares, Damon's sudden fear of anyone in uniform. When he reached the yellow legal pad page detailing the SUV conversation, he stopped, looked up sharply, his reading glasses catching the afternoon light. They said this where you could hear them? Word for word. Lorraine's voice was steady. Hargrove told Fullerton, "That's 4 from this zone this week. Regional's going to love the numbers." She responded that these neighborhoods are easy. Nobody fights back. "And you documented this when?" Within 6 hours of release. Written notes first, then typed and time-stamped. I also recorded a verbal account on my phone immediately after leaving the facility. Okonkwo leaned back in his chair. A slow smile spread across his face, though his eyes held no warmth, only the cold satisfaction of a man who had just been handed a winning case. "Judge Ashford, they didn't just violate your rights." He tapped the legal pad with one finger. "They handed you the blueprint to expose an entire system, quota-based enforcement, targeting minority neighborhoods, performance metrics tied to detention numbers. This isn't one bad stop. This is policy." Lorraine nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here. They're going to offer you money, significant money, with confidentiality agreements designed to bury this forever." "I'm not interested in money." Okonkwo studied her for a long moment. "What are you interested in?" "A trial. Public. Every document in the open. Every email exposed. Every agent on the stand explaining exactly how they decide who looks illegal." Lorraine leaned forward. "I want the entire country watching when we prove this is systematic." Okonkwo's smile widened. "Then let's give them something to watch." The lawsuit filed 4 weeks later in the United States District Court for the District of Minnesota. The defendants, the United States of America, the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and agents Vincent Hargrove, Denise Fullerton, and Keith Rawlings in their individual capacities. The charges were specific and devastating: unlawful detention, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, racial profiling in violation of the Equal Protection Clause, intentional infliction of emotional distress, denial of due process, deprivation of civil rights under color of federal authority. The evidence was overwhelming. Body camera footage from all three agents showing the complete encounter, 6 bystander videos providing additional angles, Whole Foods security footage from 3 cameras covering the parking lot, Judge Ashford's credentials, her 23-year service record, her unanimous Senate confirmation, psychological evaluations documenting trauma in both children, testimony from witnesses who'd watched the arrest unfold. The government's first settlement offer arrived 6 weeks after filing. $100,000, dismissal with prejudice, comprehensive non-disclosure agreement sealing all evidence and prohibiting any public discussion. Okonkwo called Lorraine with the number. She didn't hesitate. No. The second offer came 3 months later, after Discovery had begun revealing the scope of documentation. $500,000. Same confidentiality terms. No. The third offer arrived as Discovery intensified. $1.5 million. No confidentiality requirement this time, just dismissal and silence. Lorraine considered it for exactly as long as it took to think about Zoe's face in that parking lot. No. We're going to trial. Discovery blew the case open. Okonkwo's team subpoenaed internal ICE communications from the Minneapolis regional office. What came back confirmed everything Lorraine had heard in that Tahoe. Emails discussing performance metrics tied to detention numbers. Supervisors praising agents for high-yield operations in specific zip codes. Maps with minority neighborhoods highlighted and labeled priority zones. Quarterly reports showing bonuses linked to arrest quotas. Training materials that never once mentioned reasonable suspicion or Fourth Amendment constraints. The pattern was undeniable. Detention rates in the targeted neighborhoods ran 4 times higher than in predominantly white areas with identical demographic profiles. Same cities, same economic conditions, different skin colors, different outcomes. Do you believe federal agents should face stricter oversight when enforcing immigration law in American neighborhoods? Drop yes or no in the comments below. Share why accountability like this matters, why it could prevent stories like this from traumatizing families just trying to buy groceries on a Saturday morning. Okonkwo added the Discovery documents to the trial exhibits, every email, every map, every bonus calculation. The blueprint Hargrove and Fullerton had handed Lorraine in the back of that SUV was about to become the most expensive conversation in ICE history. The Warren E. Burger Federal Courthouse stood against a gray March sky 14 months after that Saturday morning in the Whole Foods parking lot. Winter still clung to Minneapolis, patches of dirty snow lining the sidewalks, the air sharp enough to sting exposed skin. Lorraine entered through the main doors at 8:15 a.m. Professional attire, navy suit, minimal jewelry, her judicial bearing evident in every step. Behind her walked Damon and Zoe, both dressed carefully for a day they would remember for the rest of their lives. Eleanor held their hands, her 78 years of Texas strength anchoring them all. The gallery was packed before the doors officially opened. Federal judges filled the first 2 rows, colleagues from the Northern District of Texas, judges from the 8th Circuit who had traveled specifically for this. A Supreme Court justice's former clerk, now a professor at Georgetown, who had written extensively about Fourth Amendment jurisprudence, the judiciary watching one of their own seek justice. Civil rights organizations occupied the rows behind them, ACLU representatives, NAACP Legal Defense Fund attorneys, immigration advocacy groups who saw this case as a defining moment, activists wearing black t-shirts with white lettering, End Racial Profiling. National media filled the press section, CNN, MSNBC, The New York Times, Washington Post. Cameras prohibited inside the courtroom, but reporters ready with notebooks, recording every word for the evening broadcasts. At the defense table sat Hargrove, Fullerton, and Rawlings. Suits instead of tactical gear, ties instead of badges. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the formal setting, flanked by federal attorneys whose expressions carried the weight of an unwinnable position. The Honorable William Sandoval took the bench at precisely 9 a.m., silver-haired, sharp-eyed, known throughout the Eighth Circuit for precision and fairness. He surveyed the packed courtroom, nodded once, and called the proceedings to order. The jury filed in. 12 Minnesotans, diverse in age and background, their faces carefully neutral. 8 women, 4 men, a retired teacher, a small business owner, a nurse, a construction foreman, ordinary citizens about to decide extraordinary questions. Okonkwo rose for his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to show you something." He pressed a button on his laptop. 6 screens around the courtroom flickered to life, displaying synchronized footage from different angles. This is October 23rd of last year. 10:23 a.m., a Whole Foods parking lot. The jury watched Judge Lorraine Ashford load groceries with her children, watched 3 agents converge in tactical formation, watched a 7-year-old girl begin to cry at the sight of armed men approaching her mother. They watched Lorraine identify herself calmly, repeatedly, while the agents dismissed her credentials. They watched her cite the Fourth Amendment, while Hargrove's hand moved toward his belt. They watched her comply slowly, hands raised, voice steady. They watched Zoe collapse to her knees, screaming. They watched the handcuffs click shut. When the footage ended, 2 jurors were wiping their eyes. The rest stared at the frozen final frame, Judge Lorraine Ashford being walked toward a federal vehicle while her children reached for her through a crowd of strangers. 23 years on the federal bench, Okonkwo said quietly. And this is how she was treated, not because of anything she did, because of how she looked. Judge Ashford's testimony lasted 2 days. She walked the jury through her career, graduated top of her class from Howard University School of Law, clerked for a Sixth Circuit judge, 15 years as a federal prosecutor, appointed to the bench by a Republican president who called her brilliant and fair, confirmed by the Senate 98-0, 23 years of service to the Constitution. Then she described that Saturday morning. "My daughter noticed them first. Her voice remained steady, but the courtroom felt the weight beneath it. Zoe saw the armed men approaching and started to cry. She was 7 years old, holding grapes she'd snuck from the grocery bag, and suddenly there were 3 federal agents in tactical gear walking toward her mother. She recounted every detail: Hargrove's flat demand for papers, her identification as a federal judge, the dismissal, the escalation, Damon's grocery bag hitting the pavement, oranges rolling across the asphalt, Zoe's sobs growing louder with each passing second. I told them I was a sitting federal judge. I offered to have my credentials verified. Agent Hargrove's response was, 'Everyone claims to be someone important. Papers. Now.' The quota conversation came next. Defense attorneys erupted with objections. Hearsay, lack of corroboration, prejudicial. Judge Sandoval overruled each one, noting the testimony's relevance to pattern and practice claims. Lorraine recounted the words exactly as spoken. That's 4 from this zone this week. Regional's going to love the numbers. And Fullerton's response, these neighborhoods are easy. Nobody fights back. The jury leaned forward. Several took notes furiously. Dr. Helen Nakamura, a child psychologist with 30 years of experience, testified about Zoe and Damon's trauma, the nightmares that still woke Zoe screaming, Damon's inability to see a police officer without his heart rate spiking, trust in authority figures shattered at ages 7 and 9. These children watched their mother handcuffed and taken away for no reason they could understand. Dr. Nakamura explained, the psychological impact of that experience, particularly at their developmental stages, cannot be overstated. Cross-examination attempted to paint Lorraine as confrontational, aggressive, uncooperative. Okonkwo simply replayed the body camera footage. The jury watched Lorraine keep her hands visible throughout, watched her voice remain calm despite her daughter's screams, watched her comply with every command while clearly articulating her constitutional objections, watched the agents ignore her credentials, dismiss her identification, proceed with arrest despite zero evidence of any wrongdoing. Professor David Oyelerin from Yale Law School testified as an expert witness. "This is a textbook Fourth Amendment violation," he stated. "No reasonable suspicion, no probable cause, no articulable facts supporting the stop. Any reasonable officer would have known this detention was unconstitutional. The case law is settled and has been for decades." The defense's qualified immunity argument crumbled under the weight of Lorraine's own expertise. She had cited specific constitutional protections while being detained. She had articulated exactly why the stop was unlawful. She had given them every opportunity to verify her identity and release her. They had proceeded anyway. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Lorraine spent them at her mother's house in Street Paul, the March wind rattling the windows, snow flurries drifting past the glass. She answered Damon and Zoe's questions with age-appropriate honesty, explained what the jury was doing, what guilty meant, what not guilty meant. Prepared them for any outcome because that was what a mother did, even a mother who also happened to be a federal judge who knew exactly how unpredictable juries could be. "What if they say the men didn't do anything wrong?" Zoe asked on the third night, her small face serious in the lamplight. Lorraine pulled her daughter close. "Then we'll know we told the truth. We'll know we fought, and sometimes that has to be enough." But she prayed it wouldn't come to that. On the 4th day, the jury sent word, verdict reached. The courtroom filled to capacity within an hour. Every seat occupied. Reporters lined the walls. The federal judges returned, filling the first rows again. Civil rights leaders, community activists, strangers who had followed the case and driven hours to witness the outcome. Damon and Zoe remained with Eleanor in a private room down the hall, shielded from whatever came next. Old enough to understand the stakes, too young to carry the weight of watching it unfold. Lorraine sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, breathing steady. Okonkwo beside her, his own composure masking whatever calculations ran through his mind. 14 months of preparation. Thousands of hours of work. Everything reduced to 12 strangers and a verdict form. Judge Sandoval took the bench. The courtroom fell silent. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood. A middle-aged woman with graying hair and steady hands. "We have, Your Honor." The verdict form passed from jury to bailiff to judge. Sandoval reviewed it without expression. Then he read, "On the charge of unlawful detention in violation of the Fourth Amendment, liable." The word echoed through the courtroom. "On the charge of racial profiling in violation of the Equal Protection Clause, liable." Lorraine's hands tightened in her lap. "On the charge of intentional infliction of emotional distress, liable." On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of federal authority, liable. Liable on all counts. Unanimous on every charge. The damages phase began immediately. Expert witnesses testified about career impact, the psychological toll, the nationwide implications of allowing such violations to go unpunished. Economists calculated lost wages and future therapy costs. Constitutional scholars explained why punitive damages were essential to deter future misconduct. The jury deliberated for 6 more hours. The final award, $15.8 million, $8.3 million in compensatory damages for the violations, the trauma, the harm to her children, the injury to her reputation and career. $7.5 million in punitive damages, calculated specifically to punish the government for fostering a system that treated quotas as more important than constitutional rights. The courtroom erupted. Applause broke out despite Judge Sandoval's gavel. Supporters in the gallery stood, some crying, some cheering. The federal judges in the front rows nodded with grim satisfaction. Reporters scrambled for their phones. At the defense table, Hargrove stared at the floor. Fullerton had gone pale. Rawlings sat motionless, his face blank with shock. The federal attorneys were already gathering papers, already calculating appeals, already preparing for the aftermath of catastrophic defeat. Lorraine remained still, her eyes closed, her hands finally unclenched. It wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about Zoe's scream in that parking lot, about Damon's cracking voice trying to defend her, about every person stopped in those easy neighborhoods who couldn't fight back. It was about the line she had drawn and the system that had just learned the cost of crossing it. The consequences came swiftly. Hargrove and Fullerton were terminated within 72 hours of the verdict. Official statements cited conduct unbecoming and violation of agency protocols. Rawlings received an indefinite suspension pending internal investigation. Their careers in federal law enforcement were over. ICE announced sweeping policy reviews, mandatory bias training for all field agents, new oversight committees with civilian participation, updated protocols requiring verification of identification claims before detention, body camera footage subject to automatic review in any stop involving constitutional objections. The Department of Justice opened an independent investigation into quota-based enforcement practices nationwide. Ashford v. United States entered the legal lexicon within months. Civil rights attorneys cited it in cases across the country. Law schools added it to constitutional law curricula. The verdict became a reference point, a precedent, proof that Fourth Amendment violations had consequences even when committed by federal agents. Lorraine returned to her bench in Dallas 6 weeks after the trial. The same chambers, the same nameplate on the door, the same robe hanging in the closet, but something had shifted. Her rulings on Fourth Amendment cases carried new weight now, written by someone who understood the violations not just as legal abstractions but as lived experience. She established the Ashford Foundation with $3 million of the settlement, legal aid for victims of unlawful detention who couldn't afford representation, scholarships for law students from marginalized communities, Know Your Rights workshops in the same neighborhoods that had been flagged as high-yield zones. The trauma didn't disappear overnight. Zoe still woke sometimes with nightmares, though less frequently now. Damon still tensed around uniformed officers, though therapy was teaching him to distinguish fear from danger. But healing came in small moments too. Damon's class assignment that spring asked students to describe someone they admired. He wrote about his mother, not about the verdict or the money or the headlines, about what she'd told him the night before the jury returned. My mom said sometimes telling the truth and fighting for what's right has to be enough. But she also said when you can win, you should win as loud as possible so everyone hears. She fights for the Constitution. That's her job, and she's really good at it. Zoe drew a picture for Eleanor's refrigerator, her mother in judge's robes, holding a gavel, standing in front of a courthouse. Above it, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "My mommy protects people." The parking lot faded into memory. The handcuffs, the cell, the 4 hours and 17 minutes of not knowing where her children were. But the victory remained. Documented, precedented, permanent. Years accumulated the way they always do. Cases decided, precedents set. The steady work of constitutional interpretation that had defined Lorraine's career long before that October morning and continued long after. Judge Ashford remained on the federal bench, her rulings sharper now, her commitment to Fourth Amendment protections deepened by experience no legal textbook could provide. When defendants claimed their rights had been violated, she listened differently. When government attorneys argued reasonable suspicion, she probed deeper. She had sat in the holding cell. She had heard the quota conversation. She knew what systemic abuse looked like from the inside. The ripple effects of the verdict spread outward. Other victims came forward. People who had been stopped in those high-yield zones. Families who had been separated during compliance checks. Citizens who had been detained for hours based on nothing but appearance. The Ashford Foundation provided attorneys. The evidence patterns established during discovery became templates for new lawsuits. What had happened to one federal judge became proof of what had happened to thousands of ordinary people. Similar cases filed across the country. Phoenix, Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, each one citing Ashford v. United States, each one building on the foundation she had laid. Settlements grew larger, policy changes accelerated. The quota system that Hargrove and Fullerton had discussed so casually became the subject of congressional hearings. Systemic change came slowly, the way it always does. But it came. The Whole Foods on Hennepin Avenue installed a small bronze plaque near the entrance 3 years after the verdict. Lorraine didn't attend the ceremony, didn't want cameras or speeches or the weight of being a symbol. but Eleanor sent her a photograph. Witness injustice. Document truth. Demand accountability. Below the words, a QR code linked to resources on civil rights and legal aid. Shoppers passed it daily, most without noticing, but some stopped to read, some took pictures. Some looked up the case and learned what had happened in that parking lot and why documentation and witnesses and refusing to stay silent mattered. Lorraine drove past grocery stores often. Saturday errands, ordinary moments, the kind of routine that most people never thought twice about. She thought about it, thought about the woman she had been that October morning, already accomplished, already distinguished. 23 years on the federal bench, hundreds of cases decided, a career that would have been remarkable even if nothing had happened in that parking lot. But something had happened, and the woman she'd become was different, not broken, transformed. Her credentials hadn't protected her that day, but they had given her the tools to fight back. Her children's trauma had become the catalyst for protecting other people's children. Her rage had been channeled into method, evidence, precision. The sharpest weapon wasn't anger. It was preparation meeting opportunity. It was knowing the law so well that you could dismantle the people who violated it. It was refusing to settle quietly when public accountability could prevent the same thing from happening to someone else. 5 years after the verdict, on a Saturday morning in late October, Lorraine pulled into a grocery store parking lot with her children. Damon was 14 now, nearly as tall as she was, earbuds in, scrolling through his phone. Zoe was 12, chattering about a school project. Her earlier trauma faded to occasional shadows that therapy had taught her to manage. Teenagers. Ordinary teenagers doing ordinary things. They loaded groceries into the SUV, autumn air crisp and cool, leaves scattered across the pavement, the familiar rhythm of a weekend errand. No agents appeared, no demands for papers, no handcuffs, no screaming. Just a mother and her children existing freely in a parking lot, the way it should have been all along. Lorraine closed the trunk and looked at Damon and Zoe, at the young people they were becoming, at the future they would build. The line she had drawn in that Minneapolis parking lot still held firm. Power, when abused, met consequences. Systems, when exposed, faced reform. Underestimated brilliance remained the sharpest weapon. She had shown them, the agents, the institution, the entire country, that some people do fight back. That credentials matter. That constitutional rights aren't just words on parchment, but protections that must be defended. And she had shown her children something more important. That fear doesn't have to be the end of the story. That trauma can become purpose. That their mother, when tested, had stood firm and prevailed. Lorraine climbed into the driver's seat. Damon claimed the front passenger position, the privilege of teenage years. Zoe sprawled across the back with her phone. "Grandma's expecting us for lunch," Lorraine said. "Can we stop for donuts?" Zoe asked. "You just ate grapes." "That was like an hour ago," Damon laughed. Lorraine smiled. The SUV pulled out of the lot. Saturday morning. Ordinary errands. A family moving through the world without incident. The way it always should have been. Now, watching footage like this, it can really stick with you, right? Some of these clips stay in your head, especially late at night when you're trying to fall asleep. And speaking of sleep, if you're someone who lies awake at 2 or 3 a.m., mind racing, unable to shut off, I know how frustrating that is. You're exhausted, but your brain just won't stop. And the worst part? The less you sleep, the worse it gets. Your energy crashes, your mood suffers, everything feels harder than it should. I struggled with this for years. Tried melatonin, white noise, warm milk, nothing worked long term. Then I found something called the 30-Day Uninterrupted Sleep Reset. It's a science-based program, no pills, no medication, that actually retrains your brain to sleep through the night, 7 to 8 hours, uninterrupted. Over 30 days, it rewires your sleep system. And once you're done, you keep the results. There's a maintenance plan so you don't slip back. Look, if you've tried everything and nothing sticks, this is different. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, if you think this case was bad, Wait until you see what happens in the case on the right.
Don't move! Keep your hands where I can see them!
Officer, this is my driveway. I'm loading my own vehicle.
You don't load bags like that unless you're up to something! Who do you think you are?
I'm a homeowner. I haven't committed a crime. You're escalating this for no reason.
Don't tell me how to do my job! Turn...
Officer Derek Wolf thought he knew exactly what he was looking at. Black male, nice neighborhood, loading bags into an SUV. In his mind, the equation was simple: burglary in progress. He had made dozens of stops just like this one over his 9-year career, approaching black men in upscale areas with his hand already resting on his weapon, his assumptions already hardened into certainty, never questioned, never challenged, never wrong in his own estimation. But when he pulled his patrol car to the curb on Ridgewood Drive on that bright Saturday morning and approached the man loading tactical gear into the back of a black Tahoe, he made the worst mistake of his career. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith wasn't burglarizing anyone's home. He was a 16-year Navy SEAL veteran with 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, a Bronze Star recipient, a Purple Heart holder, an elite warrior who had served his country in the most dangerous conditions imaginable, who had led men into combat and brought them home alive, who had sacrificed years of his life protecting the freedoms that every American enjoys. And he was loading his own gear into his own car in front of his own house. The house he had purchased 3 years ago, after his promotion to senior chief. The house where he lived with his wife, Denise, a middle school principal, and their 2 children. The house in the neighborhood where he paid property taxes, mowed his lawn, and waved to neighbors who respected him as both a military hero and a good man. But Officer Wolf didn't see any of that. He saw skin color and made his judgment. He saw a black man where a black man supposedly didn't belong and decided that was enough. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't have anticipated, was that his body camera was recording everything. Every assumption, every dismissal, every moment of the unlawful arrest that followed. The footage would become the centerpiece of a federal civil rights lawsuit that would cost the city of Riverside $875,000 and end Wolf's career in disgrace. Officer Derek Wolf had been with the Riverside Police Department for 9 years, building what his supervisors called an impressive record of proactive policing. He was known for making stops that other officers might hesitate on, for patrolling upscale neighborhoods with particular vigilance, for trusting his instincts about who belonged and who didn't. His arrest numbers were solid. His supervisors praised his initiative. On paper, he was exactly the kind of officer the department wanted on the streets. But beneath that polished reputation lay a pattern that should have ended his career years earlier. 11 formal complaints had been filed against Wolf over 7 years. 11 separate incidents where citizens alleged racial profiling, harassment, and discriminatory enforcement. The complaints told a consistent story. Wolf targeting black men in affluent neighborhoods, demanding identification without cause, treating lawful presence as inherently suspicious. A black real estate agent showing homes to clients. A black contractor arriving for a scheduled job. A black teenager walking home from a friend's house. Each one stopped. Each one questioned. Each one made to feel like a criminal for existing in spaces Wolf believed they didn't belong. Every single complaint had been dismissed or resulted in nothing more than minor counseling. Internal affairs investigations that went nowhere. Supervisors who accepted Wolf's explanations without scrutiny. A department culture that praised aggressive enforcement without examining who bore the brunt of that aggression. The data was damning for anyone willing to look. Over the past 3 years alone, Wolf had conducted 47 stops of black individuals in Riverside's wealthier neighborhoods. Not one had resulted in a legitimate arrest. Not one had uncovered actual criminal activity. 47 innocent people detained, questioned, and humiliated based on nothing but skin color and neighborhood. But no one had looked. No one had connected the dots. No one had stopped Derek Wolf before he encountered Marcus Smith. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith had spent 16 years serving the United States of America in ways most citizens could never imagine. He had enlisted in the Navy at 19, driven by a desire to challenge himself and serve something greater. He survived the brutal selection process for basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, a program with an 80% attrition rate, and earned his Trident, joining the most elite special operations force in the world. 3 combat deployments followed: Afghanistan, Iraq, operations he still couldn't discuss, missions that remained classified, nights spent in hostile territory where a single mistake meant death. He had led teams into firefights, made split-second decisions under impossible pressure, and brought his men home alive. His Bronze Star recognized exceptional valor in combat. His Purple Heart marked the price he had paid, shrapnel wounds from an IED that still ached when the weather changed. Now 41, Marcus had transitioned to an instructor role at the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility 30 miles from Riverside. He was shaping the next generation of SEALs, passing on hard-won knowledge to young warriors who would carry the burden after him. It was demanding work, but it allowed him something he had rarely experienced in his career: stability. His wife Denise had stood beside him through every deployment, every missed birthday, every sleepless night, wondering if the knock at the door would bring a chaplain in dress whites. She was a middle school principal now, respected in the community, devoted to her students. Their children, Marcus Jr., 12, and Aaliyah, 9, were thriving in Riverside's excellent schools. 3 years ago, after Marcus's promotion to senior chief, they had purchased their home in Ridgewood Estates, a 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage, a backyard where the kids could play, a neighborhood where they felt safe. They had earned it. Every sacrifice, every deployment, every year of service had led to this, a piece of the American dream. Marcus Smith had fought for his country in the most dangerous places on Earth. He never expected the greatest threat to his dignity would come in his own driveway. The Saturday morning had dawned clear and bright, late spring sunshine warming the quiet streets of Ridgewood Estates. The temperature sat at a comfortable 72 degrees, the kind of perfect weather that brought neighbors out to wash cars and tend gardens. Sprinklers hissed on manicured lawns. Birds sang in the mature oak trees that lined the sidewalks. It was peaceful, suburban, safe. Marcus Smith had been awake since 5:30 a.m., his body still running on military time despite the weekend. He had a 2-week training exercise starting Monday at the Naval Special Warfare Facility, and he needed to pack his gear. Denise had taken the kids to her mother's house for the weekend, giving Marcus time to prepare without distraction. By 9:15 a.m., he was in his driveway loading the black Tahoe, sea bag with uniforms, tactical equipment cases, his worn pair of jungle boots that had seen 3 deployments, a garment bag holding his dress uniform for an awards ceremony scheduled at the end of the exercise. His Navy SEAL trident, the gold insignia that marked him as one of America's elite warriors, was clearly visible on the jacket hanging in the back seat. Military stickers adorned the rear window. A SEAL trident decal, a veteran emblem, a small American flag. Anyone who looked could see exactly who Marcus Smith was and what he represented. At 9:23 a.m., a 911 call was placed from a blocked number. The caller, voice calm and matter-of-fact, reported a suspicious black male possibly burglarizing a house on Ridgewood Drive. No specific address, no description of clothing. No details about what made the activity suspicious, just race and assumption wrapped in the language of concern. The dispatcher asked clarifying questions. What is he doing that seems suspicious? Can you describe what he's wearing? What house specifically? The caller provided nothing useful, just kept repeating, black male, loading bags, doesn't look like he belongs. The call was logged. A unit was dispatched. Officer Derek Wolf, already patrolling 2 streets away, responded immediately. Wolf's patrol car turned onto Ridgewood Drive at 9:27 a.m., his body camera already activated and recording. The late morning sun hung bright in a cloudless sky, flooding the street with perfect natural light. Every detail would be captured in sharp clarity: the green lawns, the stately homes, and the black man standing at the rear of a Tahoe in the driveway of 4127 Ridgewood Drive. Marcus was placing the last bag into the trunk when he heard the engine. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the patrol car slowing, then stopping directly in front of his house. His trained instincts registered the situation immediately. He had dealt with law enforcement countless times in his career: military police, base security, federal agents during classified operations. He knew how to handle himself. He turned to face the officer, keeping his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. 16 years of operating in hostile environments had taught him the value of calm. Wolf exited his vehicle with his hand already resting on his holstered weapon. His body camera captured his approach quick, aggressive, his footsteps heavy on the asphalt. The camera recorded his view. Marcus standing by the open trunk, wearing a gray navy t-shirt and khaki shorts, his muscular build evident, his expression composed. "Step away from the vehicle," Wolf commanded, his voice loud enough for neighbors to hear. "Put your hands where I can see them. Now." Marcus complied immediately, raising his hands to shoulder height and taking 2 slow steps back from the Tahoe. His movements were deliberate, controlled, designed to de-escalate. The body camera captured every moment in the unforgiving daylight. "Officer, I'm Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith, United States Navy," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. "This is my house. I'm loading my car. I live here." He gestured slowly toward the front door, toward the house numbers clearly visible beside it, toward his entire life sitting in plain view. Wolf's camera recorded his response, a dismissive shake of his head, his hand still on his weapon, his posture unchanged. "Sure you do." Marcus kept his hands raised, his years of training overriding the anger building in his chest. "My wallet is in my back pocket," he said calmly. "I have my military ID and my driver's license. The license shows this address. Can I reach for it slowly?" Wolf nodded curtly, his hand still hovering near his weapon. His body camera recorded Marcus's deliberate movement, reaching back with 2 fingers, extracting a worn leather wallet, opening it with practiced care. Marcus held out his military identification card, the official Department of Defense credential that identified him as Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus A. Smith, United States Navy. Wolf glanced at it for less than 2 seconds. His camera captured his own dismissive gesture, his hand waving the ID away like it was worthless. "Anyone can buy these online," Wolf said flatly. "Doesn't prove anything." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "Then look at my driver's license." He held it out, the California license clearly displaying his photo, his name, and his address. 4127 Ridgewood Drive, Riverside, California. The same numbers visible on the house directly behind him. Wolf barely looked. His body camera recorded, his eyes flicking to the license and away again, his mind already made up. Evidence irrelevant. "For all I know, that's fake too," Wolf said. "We got a call about someone casing this neighborhood, loading bags into a car. Looks like burglary to me." "Casing the neighborhood?" Marcus repeated, disbelief breaking through his composure. "Officer, I've lived here for 3 years. I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm packing for a training exercise. My gear," he gestured toward the open trunk, toward the military equipment in plain view, toward the Trident decal on the window, "should make that obvious." "What's obvious?" Wolf cut him off, stepping closer. "Is that you're getting defensive. Innocent people don't get defensive." Marcus took a breath. "Remain calm. Don't escalate." The training that had kept him alive in combat zones now applied to his own driveway. He had seen situations spiral out of control. He had watched men die because someone lost their composure. He would not give this officer any excuse. At 9:34 a.m., a second patrol car arrived. Officer Tanya Reeves stepped out, her own body camera activated and recording. Her footage would provide the second angle, a wider view showing Marcus's house behind him, the military stickers on his vehicle, Wolf's aggressive stance. Reeves approached slowly, her expression shifting as she took in the scene. Her camera captured what Wolf's missed: the homeowner's calm demeanor, the visible military insignia, the complete absence of anything resembling criminal activity. "Derek," she said quietly, stepping beside her colleague, "what's the situation?" "Got a burglary call," Wolf replied, not taking his eyes off Marcus. "He claims he lives here. I'm not buying it." Reeves's camera recorded her glancing at the house, at the car, at the military ID still in Marcus's outstretched hand. Her footage captured her own discomfort, the slight furrow of her brow, the way she shifted her weight, the hesitation before she spoke. "Did you verify the address?" she asked carefully. "I don't need to verify anything," Wolf snapped. "I know what I'm looking at." Reeves said nothing more, but her body camera recorded everything, including her own silence when she should have spoken up. Wolf had heard enough. His mind was made up the moment he pulled onto Ridgewood Drive, and nothing, not military IDs, not driver's licenses, not the obvious truth standing right in front of him would change it. "Turn around," he ordered, reaching for his handcuffs. "Hands behind your back." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "You're arresting me? For what?" "Suspicious activity and failure to comply with a lawful order." The words came out rehearsed, bureaucratic, the language of authority wielded without justification. "I've complied with every order you've given," Marcus said, his voice rising for the first time. "I've shown you identification. I've answered your questions. I've done everything right. What law have I broken?" Wolf stepped forward, handcuffs open. "Turn around, now, last warning." Marcus looked at Reeves, whose camera captured the plea in his eyes, the silent request for intervention, for someone to stop this madness. She looked away. Her footage recorded her own shoes, her own shame, her own failure to act. Marcus turned slowly, placing his hands behind his back. As the metal closed around his wrists, the click captured on both body cameras, he spoke directly into Wolf's lens, his voice steady despite everything. "My name is Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Anthony Smith. Service number 847296153. United States Navy, 16 years of service. My address is 4127 Ridgewood Drive, Riverside, California, the house directly behind me. I am being arrested without probable cause, without evidence of any crime, in my own driveway. I am asserting my Fourth Amendment rights. This arrest is unlawful." The statement was precise, deliberate. The words of a man trained to document, to record, to survive. Neighbors had begun emerging from their homes. Wolf's camera captured them gathering on lawns, faces showing confusion, concern, and growing anger. A white man in his 60s strode across the street, his posture military rigid, his expression furious. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. "Sir, step back," Wolf warned. "This is police business. I'm Colonel Richard Hayes, United States Marine Corps, retired." The man shot back, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in uniform. "And that man you're handcuffing is my neighbor, a Navy SEAL, a goddamn war hero. He lives here. What are you doing?" "Sir, I won't ask again. I've known Marcus Smith for 3 years," Hayes continued, ignoring the warning. "He's loaded that car a dozen times for training exercises. Everyone on this street knows him. What possible reason do you have for this?" Wolf's camera recorded his jaw tightening, his face flushing. He had no answer. He offered none. At 9:52 a.m., a silver Honda Accord turned onto Ridgewood Drive. Reeves's camera captured the car slowing, then stopping abruptly in the middle of the street. Denise Smith stepped out, her face shifting from confusion to horror in a single heartbeat. "Marcus?" Her voice cracked. "Marcus!" She ran toward the driveway, her footsteps captured on audio, her breathing ragged. Reeves stepped into her path, hands raised. "Ma'am, please stay back." "That's my husband," Denise screamed, the sound piercing through both body camera microphones. "That's my house! What are you doing? Why is he in handcuffs?" She pulled out her phone, hands shaking violently, and began dialing. Both cameras captured her frantic voice as she reached someone, a lawyer, a family member, the beginnings of the storm that would follow. "They're arresting Marcus," she sobbed. "In our driveway. Please, please come. Please help us." The patrol car pulled into the Riverside Police Department at 10:17 a.m. Wolf's body camera recorded the journey, 25 minutes of silence. Marcus sitting in the back seat with his hands cuffed behind him, his face turned toward the window, revealing nothing. The camera captured glimpses of his expression in the rearview mirror, controlled, composed, the mask of a man trained to endure far worse than this. Inside the station, Marcus was led to the booking area. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving after the morning sunshine. Wolf's camera recorded him removing the handcuffs, Marcus's wrists showing red marks where the metal had pressed too tight. The booking officer was a woman in her 40s named Patricia Delgado. She had processed hundreds of arrests over her 15-year career: drug dealers, drunk drivers, domestic abusers. She had seen everything. But when she ran Marcus Smith's information through the system, her fingers stopped moving. "No criminal record," she said slowly, reading the screen. "Not even a traffic ticket." She kept scrolling. Her expression shifted. "Military service verified. Active duty. United States Navy. Senior Chief Petty Officer." She looked up at Wolf, then at Marcus, then back at the screen. "Bronze Star. Purple Heart. Current assignment. Naval Special Warfare Training Command." The booking area went quiet. Delgado's voice dropped. "Homeowner at 4127 Ridgewood Drive. 3 years at that address. Property tax records confirmed." She turned to face Wolf directly, her camera angle capturing his profile, the color draining from his face, the realization beginning to dawn. "Derek," she said carefully, "what exactly did this man do?" Wolf's camera recorded his own hesitation, his mouth opening and closing without sound. 20 minutes later, Sergeant William Patterson arrived to review the body camera footage. He commandeered a small office, pulled up Wolf's recording on a monitor, and watched in silence. Reeves's footage played next, providing the second angle. The station's security cameras, mounted in the hallway outside, captured Patterson, emerging after 45 minutes. His face was ashen. He found Wolf in the break room. The hallway camera recorded their conversation through the glass window, no audio, but the body language spoke volumes. Patterson leaning in close, his finger jabbing toward Wolf's chest. Wolf stepping back, hands raised defensively, shaking his head. Patterson's final gesture, a sharp point toward the exit, unmistakable in its meaning. The security footage captured Patterson's words through the glass, lip-readable by experts who would later analyze the tape. "This is a problem, a big goddamn problem." Marcus Smith sat in a holding cell for 4 hours. No charges were filed, no paperwork was processed. At 2:23 p.m., Sergeant Patterson personally escorted him to the front desk, where Denise waited with red-rimmed eyes and a civil rights attorney already on speakerphone. "You're free to go," Patterson said quietly, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. We're sorry for the inconvenience." Inconvenience. The word hung in the air like an insult. Marcus said nothing. He took his wife's hand, walked through the front doors into the afternoon sunlight, and began planning his response. Marcus Smith made his first call from the parking lot of the Riverside Police Department. His commanding officer, Captain David Jones, answered on the second ring. "Sir, I need to report an incident," Marcus said, his voice flat, controlled. "I was just arrested at my home, held for 4 hours, no charges. I have reason to believe it was racial profiling." Captain Jones listened in silence as Marcus recounted the morning's events. When Marcus finished, Jones's response was immediate. "I'm contacting JAG," he said, "today. This doesn't stand." The Navy's Judge Advocate General's Corps opened an inquiry within 48 hours. Military attorneys reviewed the circumstances, documented Marcus's account, and reached a conclusion that surprised no one who had seen the footage. A decorated senior enlisted member had been subjected to unlawful arrest while engaged in official preparation for duty. The Navy took care of its own. But Marcus wanted more than military intervention. He wanted accountability. The JAG attorneys connected him with Patricia Okonkwo, a civilian civil rights lawyer whose reputation preceded her. Okonkwo had spent 18 years litigating police misconduct cases across California. She had won settlements totaling over $12 million. She had brought down officers, exposed departments, and forced reforms that changed how entire cities approached policing. When she heard Marcus's story, she cleared her calendar. "First thing we need is the footage," she told Marcus during their initial meeting, her office walls lined with framed newspaper articles about her victories. "Their own cameras will tell us everything." Okonkwo filed a Freedom of Information Act request the following morning. She demanded all body camera recordings from the incident, all dispatch records related to the anonymous 911 call, and the complete complaint history for Officer Derek Wolf. The city stalled, Okonkwo pushed. Deadlines were cited, legal pressure applied. 3 weeks later, a hard drive arrived at her office containing 47 gigabytes of video files and a spreadsheet of internal affairs records that the department had clearly hoped would never see daylight. What she found was damning beyond expectation. Officer Derek Wolf had conducted 47 documented stops of black individuals in Riverside's affluent neighborhoods over the past 3 years. 47 separate incidents where he had approached, detained, and questioned black men and women based on nothing more than their presence in spaces he deemed inappropriate. Not a single stop had resulted in a legitimate arrest. Not one had uncovered actual criminal activity. 47 innocent people, doctors, lawyers, contractors, visitors, residents, humiliated and traumatized because of the color of their skin. Okonkwo spread the records across her conference table. The pattern undeniable. They knew, she said quietly. They had to know, and they did nothing. The federal civil rights lawsuit was filed 8 weeks after Marcus Smith's arrest. Smith v. City of Riverside, Officer Derek Wolf. The complaint landed like a thunderclap, its allegations methodical and devastating. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful seizure without probable cause or reasonable suspicion. False arrest, detention and handcuffing without legal justification. Racial profiling, discriminatory enforcement based solely on race, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conduct so outrageous that no civilized society should tolerate it. The complaint named Wolf, individually, and the City of Riverside for its failure to train, supervise, and discipline an officer with a documented pattern of discriminatory conduct. The depositions began 4 months later. Patricia Okonkwo had spent decades perfecting the art of letting officers destroy themselves with their own words, their own footage, their own inability to justify the unjustifiable. Wolf's body camera footage was played on a large monitor in the conference room. His own lens had captured everything in the bright morning sunlight. Marcus's military ID held out for inspection, the Department of Defense seal clearly visible, the words United States Navy legible even on the small screen. Agent Wolf, Okonkwo said, pausing the video at the 2-second mark where Wolf glanced at and dismissed the ID. You testified that you couldn't verify this identification, but your own camera shows you looking directly at it. Can you read what it says? Wolf shifted in his seat. I saw it. And what did it say? Silence. It identified Mr. Smith as a senior chief petty officer in the United States Navy, didn't it? I thought it might be fake. Based on what evidence? More silence. His attorney leaned in to whisper something. Wolf shook his head. I've seen fake IDs before. Have you ever seen a fake Department of Defense military identification card? No answer. Officer Reeves's footage was played next, the wider angle showing Marcus's house directly behind him, the military stickers on his vehicle, the complete absence of any criminal activity. Her camera had also captured something else. Her own quiet suggestion to Wolf. Did you verify the address? Her recorded voice asked. I don't need to verify anything, Wolf's voice responded. I know what I'm looking at. Okonkwo let the words hang in the room. Then came the pattern evidence. 47 stops displayed on a timeline, each one documented with dates, locations, and outcomes. A. Exposed. Black individuals in nice neighborhoods, stopped without cause, released without charges, their dignity stripped away by an officer who faced no consequences. The city's attorneys watched the evidence accumulate like a verdict already written. They had seen enough lawsuits to know when a case was unwinnable. This one had been lost the moment Wolf activated his body camera. The City of Riverside's legal team knew they were facing a disaster. They had seen the body camera footage. They had reviewed the pattern evidence. They had watched Patricia Okonkwo dismantle Officer Wolf's justifications in depositions, leaving nothing but stammered non-answers and damning silence. And they had imagined with growing dread what a jury would see when that footage played on courtroom monitors. 12 ordinary citizens watching a decorated Navy SEAL, a Bronze Star recipient, a man who had bled for his country, being handcuffed in his own driveway, his military ID dismissed, his driver's license ignored, his dignity stripped away while neighbors watched in horror and his wife sobbed in the street. No jury in America would side with the city. The only question was how much the verdict would cost. Settlement negotiations began 6 months after the lawsuit was filed. The city's initial offer was insulting $150,000, barely enough to cover attorney fees. Okonkwo rejected it without counteroffering. They came back with $300,000, rejected, $500,000, rejected. They're not understanding what they're facing, Okonkwo told Marcus during a strategy session. A jury won't just compensate you. They'll punish the city. They'll send a message. We could be looking at 7 figures, plus punitive damages. The city's attorneys understood eventually. Their final offer arrived on a Thursday afternoon, $875,000, plus comprehensive departmental reforms. No admission of liability, they never admit liability, but the settlement terms told their own story. Marcus accepted. The money mattered less than what came with it. Officer Derek Wolf was terminated within 72 hours of the settlement announcement. 9 years on the force, 11 ignored complaints, 47 discriminatory stops, all of it ending not with accountability from within, but with external pressure the department could no longer resist. He would never wear a badge again. Officer Tanya Reeves received a formal reprimand and was transferred to records management, a desk assignment far from the streets where her silence had enabled Wolf's abuse. She lasted 3 months before submitting her resignation. In her exit interview, captured in departmental records that would later become public, she admitted the truth she had avoided. That Saturday morning, "I knew it was wrong," she said. "I knew he was targeting that man because he was black, and I didn't say anything. I can't live with that. I can't wear this uniform knowing what I let happen." The mandatory reforms were extensive. New protocols requiring residency verification before any arrest at a private residence, enhanced bias training with quarterly assessments and accountability metrics, an independent civilian oversight board with full subpoena power to investigate complaints, the teeth that internal affairs had always lacked. The Riverside Police Department would never operate the same way again. The cost of protecting Derek Wolf had finally come due. Marcus Smith could have taken his settlement and disappeared. He could have returned to his life, his family, his career, his quiet street in Ridgewood Estates, and let the system move on without him. Many victims did exactly that, exhausted by the process, eager to forget. But Marcus had spent 16 years running toward danger, not away from it. He wasn't about to stop now. 3 weeks after the settlement was announced, he appeared before the Riverside City Council. The chamber was packed journalists, activists, community members, and fellow veterans who had heard about his case and traveled from across the state to show support. Television cameras lined the back wall. Marcus wore his dress uniform, every ribbon and medal displayed on his chest. The trident gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He stood at the podium and spoke without notes, his voice carrying the same steady authority that had led men through combat. "I have served this country for 16 years, he began. "I have been shot at by enemies overseas. I have lost friends in combat. I have sacrificed time with my family, missed my children's birthdays, spent holidays in places I can't name, doing things I can't discuss. I did all of this willingly, proudly, because I believed in what this country stands for." He paused, letting the silence settle. "And then I was handcuffed in my own driveway because a police officer saw a black man in a nice neighborhood and decided I didn't belong. My military ID meant nothing. My service meant nothing. My home, my family, my sacrifices, none of it mattered. To Officer Wolf, I was just another suspicious black male." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "This isn't just about me," Marcus continued. "It's about every black veteran who comes home from serving their country only to be treated like a criminal in their own community. It's about every black professional who gets stopped for driving a nice car or walking in the wrong neighborhood. It's about a system that protects officers like Derek Wolf until outside pressure forces accountability." He announced the creation of the Warriors for Justice Foundation that same night. Funded by a significant portion of his settlement, the organization would provide free legal resources to veterans facing discrimination, connecting them with attorneys, documenting patterns of abuse, ensuring that those who served their country could fight back when their country failed them. Marcus returned to his duties at the Naval Special Warfare Training Command, but his role had expanded. He now led a new module on civil rights and community relations, teaching the next generation of SEALs not just how to operate in hostile territory abroad, but how to navigate a society that too often treated them as threats at home. "You will face enemies overseas," he told each new class, his voice firm. "But some of you will face different enemies here. Know your rights. Document everything. And never let anyone convince you that your service doesn't matter." The body camera footage from that Saturday morning became required viewing at the Riverside Police Academy. Every new recruit watched Wolf's dismissal of Marcus's credentials, watched Reeves's silence, watched a decorated hero treated like a suspect. The lesson was explicit. Assumptions destroy careers, bias costs taxpayers, and body cameras capture everything. Marcus Smith had fought for his country across 3 continents. In the end, his most important battle was won in his own driveway, and its impact would be felt for generations. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Smith gave 16 years of his life to the United States of America, 3 combat deployments to the most dangerous places on Earth, a Bronze Star for exceptional valor under fire, a Purple Heart for wounds, sustained defending the freedoms that every American holds dear. He led men into battle and brought them home alive. He missed birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays so that others could celebrate theirs in peace. He sacrificed in ways that most citizens will never understand and asked for nothing in return but the chance to live quietly with his family in the country he had served. His reward for that service? Handcuffed in his own driveway on a Saturday morning because Officer Derek Wolf saw a black man in a nice neighborhood and decided he didn't belong. His military ID was dismissed as fake. His driver's license was ignored. His credentials, his combat decorations, his 16 years of sacrifice, all of it rendered meaningless by an officer who had already made up his mind the moment he turned onto Ridgewood Drive. But Officer Wolf made one critical mistake. He activated his body camera. Every dismissive word was recorded. Every aggressive gesture was captured. Every moment of Marcus Smith's calm compliance and Wolf's baseless escalation was preserved in high-definition video with crystal-clear audio. The very device meant to protect officers from false accusations became the evidence that exposed the truth. That truth cost the city of Riverside $875,000. It cost Derek Wolf his career, his badge, and his reputation. It forced a police department to implement reforms it had resisted for years.